Barre was settled, like a lot of central Vermont actually was settled after the initial settlement of the state. You know, they came up the waterways initially, Connecticut River, Champlain Valley. So this was the hardcore center, and people did discover that it was pretty hardcore. There was a lot of stone here. Not the best farming community, but you know, that's what was on offer. People were coming up to Vermont. Vermont was the new frontier after the Revolution. So this was the land that was opening up. So they came mostly from Massachusetts and Connecticut, and that's where the people from Barre came. Marjorie Strong, Assistant Librarian at the Vermont Historical Society and former archivist at the Archives of Barre History. The descriptions of their coming here was that they came following the military roads and then had to bushwhack pretty much, and with sledges and pulling their goods here. They first settled not in where we have downtown Barre, because that actually was a swamp. They followed a lot of the settlement patterns, which is hill settlement. So they settled in South Barre first. That was the first center of Barre, and in North Barre. Barre developed politically very traditionally as well. It was pretty much like any of the New England or Vermont towns. It was probably as Republican as any of them. Or at that point it was Whigs and Republican Democrats. In any case, the Civil War probably confirmed them in their Republican. You know, they really did support Lincoln here. They did send soldiers out. It was a typical Vermont village until the coming of the railroad, which really transformed it. Railroad brought with it, you know, a lot of people. With the grain industry brought the immigrants, and that's where you get the Barre changing itself from a typical Vermont village and town. So the first wave was the Scots. They came with the skills for quarrying, which was very needed, and also with carving, but they were more basic letterers, architectural. They could do art, but that's not their training. As the industry grew, by about 10 years later, they really began bringing Italians in for the art aspect. The immigrants brought their politics with them. The Italians were more passionate and viewed it as a way of cultural change as well. And so their anarchism and their socialism, first of all, was turned towards Italy. They were using Barre as a jump-off point to change Italy. Over time, they changed their focus back towards the United States, but by then things had gotten pretty sticky for socialists. I mean, McKinley getting shot really changed people's views about anarchism in town. I think that they were accepted, and as long as they didn't stir up things too much, that was all right, but they weren't really welcomed as much as the socialists were. The socialists built their own hall, which goes to show, you know, once you can build a building, you're pretty accepted. And it's the Socialist Labor Party building. It's on Granite Street. It was built by both, I think, anarchists and socialists, but the socialists really ran the building. And they had their, it was all really cultural. They had parties there. They had a cooperative store there. They had meetings there, of course. The anarchists never organized, of course. That's not really what they do. There was a kind of a separate culture almost in north and south ends of town where the Italians settled, because they didn't interact so much, and the anarchists particularly would abstain from voting. They didn't feel they should participate in government so much, so they did their own thing. The city kind of just absorbed this. It was kind of part of what was going on then. There were more shootings, there was more guns, there was things happening at that time. It was a pretty tumultuous time of cultures hitting, I think. That sort of leads into the Cordy shooting, which happened in 1903. That happened at the Socialist Labor Party building. It was a socialist speaker from New York City coming. The anarchists didn't agree with him so much, so there was a fair high feeling about it. They were both at the Labor Hall, and he was late. The speaker was late. In the midst of this, Alexander Garetto, who was an anarchist, I think he was a tool sharpener, ended up pulling a gun and shooting fairly wildly, and he hit Cordy. This was, unfortunately, it was a bad wound, and Cordy eventually died from it. But poor Goretto was not expecting, I mean, he wasn't actually trying to assassinate anybody. It was more of a feeling of he felt attacked. And he ended up running up to the city hall while all the police ran down. They went on two different streets, actually. He ran up the back side, they ran up the front side. They arrived at City Hall, or at the Socialist Labor Party building, where everyone had left, and ended up arresting the speaker, who was standing around wondering what had happened, while Goretto actually had run all the way to City Hall and was actually in City Hall hiding behind the desk of the judge, because he was afraid he was going to get lynched, because Cordy was very popular and very skilled. He was one of the most skilled carvers in town. So he had basically hit one of the top Italians in town and killed him.